Good morning, everybody. I'm asking Mr. Gendron to grab the tissues on my table. For those of you who know me, I can be very emotional at times, so I'm hoping not to lose my emotions today, but I do want to acknowledge that you're here. Firstly, I didn't think there'd be more than 50 students sitting here, so I only printed about 50 copies of a selected chapter in the book. But let me start at the very beginning. I don't think Mr. Gendron mentioned, my hands are sticky, my screen is not moving. Give me a minute. So, I don't think thank you very much, Mr. Gendron. I appreciate your help. He's been one of those PR agents that has publicized my book from day one, so thank you very much. At the end of this talk, chat, challenge session, there's going to be 2 books given away, so you better listen very carefully, because Mr. Gendron is going to ask you questions, and 2 people are going to win a book. So, let me start. Good morning, everybody. What a privilege for me to stand before you today and take you on the wild side of Africa. Here I am, born on a farm, raised in a barn in Africa, and growing old in Canada. Okay, that just sounded so nice to write it like that. I was not born in a barn, but it sounded so nice. So what started as an adventure for me, an adventurous campaign to live overseas as a young boy, became a romantic escape out of Africa, and one day my life will end in Canada. But I do hope that this fairy tale ending of my life will end up with yet another book. So I want to thank you for choosing my session to take this long walk of freedom out of Africa and to Canada. Now, there's something that I always say, boys and girls, is that Canada is a land of many promises, but it's not the promised land. So I'm going to challenge you, who are young, recent immigrants, that you take every opportunity that this beautiful country offers you. Now, this morning, I'm going to break my session into 3 parts, and I'll explain that very briefly. But firstly, I want to draw attention to my banner with the QR code and my Instagram account, not including the fake one somebody's made at school with my picture. I take no responsibility for that. But I do want to say to you that this banner was born at Catholic Central. My 2 technical students were from Catholic Central. And I mentioned that deliberately because my story is your story. Your story is their story. I'm going to mention those 2 students by name, Daniel Rojas Cantor and Simon Hawir. With their permission, I'm going to share with you, Daniel was a refugee to Canada. That means he fled his country for safety in Canada. Simon is an immigrant from Iraq. These boys were invaluable in setting up the banner, in typesetting my book. I was, let's say, the brain behind writing the story, but I depended on these boys to set the book for me. Why am I telling you this story? It doesn't mean because you can't speak English, you can't manipulate a keyboard. It doesn't mean because you're not that fluent in English, you don't have technical skills. And I always say this, and I'm going to say this again. Because I speak with an accent, sounds funny, right? The way I speak. It does not mean I'm thinking with that accent. I'm going to repeat that for you. When somebody speaks with an accent, they speak funny, the English sounds different. It does not mean that they don't have wisdom. I want you to keep that and treasure that for the rest of your life, because you all have skills and talents, and I'm going to come to that challenge. So I do want to acknowledge those 2 young men. I do want to share with you that when it comes to Instagram and Facebook and TikTok, I don't have TikTok. I'm pretty useless. I even fell for the trick when I was going on Instagram, and one day I got a tech email saying, you made too many postings today. Can you please type this number in? And I did. Mr. Ayatonin is laughing. I typed the number, and then it says, wait for 4 hours before we reinstate your Instagram account. Guess what? Somebody stole my 500 fake friends. I lost my account name. I ran to Mr. Ayatollah the next day. I said, "Sir, help me, help me." He said, "What did you do?" I said, "Well, they said to me, you posted one too many pictures, so I sent this secret code, and somebody stole my name. So I had to change my Instagram account to African Sons 1 with the help of Mr. Ayatollah." Now, these teachers are smart. You need help, you go to your teachers. Don't come to Mr. Naicker, he knows nothing but tech. So, my little claim to fame, I printed out some copies for you today. If you turn to, not now, if you turn to the back page, it'll tell you all about me. My name, my education, my qualifications. I do want to tell you something, boys and girls, that those letters behind my name didn't come easy. I struggled through high school. I worked hard at college. The 3 universities I went to, I earned my degrees with blood, sweat, and tears, sleepless nights, and a lot of money. You too can do that. So my little claim to fame, I had a great launch in March of 2021, I think. I forget, 2021? Or was it 2022? Help me, Jeff. My memory is going. Yeah, 2021. Former student at Tabuli's towards Tecumseh. Former student of ours, hosted the party, the great. And then, of course, with that little bit of fame, I'm just going to call it fame, I'm chuffed about it. The University of Windsor invited me to a talk, to the radio show, which I was happy to do. Then, of course, our own Mr. Gendron flighted me for the Black History Month session. And then last year, I went home to Africa, South Africa, to see my family. And of course, you all know my brother passed away the day I arrived. But my sister-in-law, who's been a big advocate, said, "I do want to see you on television. I do want to hear you on the radio." And guess what? Your Vice Principal, Micheal Naicker, appeared on national television in South Africa in December. Thank you, thank you. Okay, we'll cut the whistles, okay? The claps will be fine. And then, of course, within the African diaspora, that means all the people of Africa that came from, my ancestors came from India to Africa. And so there's about 5 million of us in South Africa out of a population of about 40 million. And so there's a national radio station called Radio Lotus. And so I had the opportunity of being on Radio Lotus for half an hour. It was really nice. I enjoyed it. But of course, that was my little claim to fame, because when I went to my brother's funeral, almost every Indian that was at the funeral heard me on the radio. Some people even called. And a lady who called from my hometown of Kwambanambi, because now the radio is funny. As you talk, you can even type to the radio station. The guy says, "Who's this Vasi?" And I laughed, because that lady, Vasi, would have been my sister-in-law. She loved my brother to bits. But I don't tell that to my sister-in-law today, because that would make war. Okay, so boys and girls, if you're taking pictures, please share them with me. I do want to thank the photographers that are here, because this is my trial run. This is my trial run to the University of Windsor, because on the 27th of September at 5 p.m., I have been booked to speak at the University of Windsor. I'm so chuffed because I got the booking last year. It's like a year and a half in advance. So I'm going to break this session into 3 parts. Part 1 is the trials and tribulations of a writer. I'm putting myself in your shoes, because this is a teaching moment, a learning moment. Then the second part is, hey, if Mr. Naicker can publish a book, what's so good about him? Why can't I write a book? That's the second part that I want to talk to you about. And then the third part is, I'm going to open the floor to you and let you ask questions. And the final part of this is, I'm going to challenge you to a question that only you can answer at the end of the session. So part 1 is, who am I? Your Vice Principal, Micheal. My Indian name is Micheal Naicker. And for those of you who wonder, like, what was I called in school? I was called Ali in school. And I got into so much of trouble. Here's an Indian Christian boy standing in school on a Friday, and the mosque was next door. Can you imagine how many slaps I got for missing namaz? Because everybody called me Ali at school. And Ali is not in mosque, and boom, boom. Why haven't you gone to namaz? What's namaz, miss? Then they realize, oops, you're talking to a boy who has no idea what Islam is. So sometimes when parents call me and say, what religion do you profess? No, Ali Muthu is an authentic South Indian name, except when I go to the border. So I feel for you, my Islamic brothers and sisters, because I get pulled off every time when they read the name Ali. So you know where I'm going with that. So I'm a self-taught writer. I got to admit, Mr. Ayatonin and all the youngsters here, I'm also a Google-taught writer. I didn't have any ideas how to write. But this past week, I went into 2 teachers' classrooms, Miss Buchanan, Miss Menard, and they were teaching students how to write properly. And I said, oh my God, I wish I had been listening to my high school teachers, because that is where you learn how to write, in the classroom. So I was inspired by all my farm school teachers of reading books. I started reading very, very early, because in South Africa, in order to pass grade 12, you have to have read 20 novels and summarized them, 20 plays and summarized them, and at least 20 poems. You start that in grade 3 years before you get to grade 12. So there's a fear of God in you early to read. So without further ado, I'm going to do a reading for you and then go to the second part of how I wrote. And then, of course, you can ask questions. Now, my good friend, Mr. Gendron, picked the chapter. It's called October 1974. Now, you do the math. I was born in 1961. 1974 was a big year for me. Anybody did the math? What age I was in 1974? I was born in 61, but the chapter is called 1974. 13 years old. Okay, so you feel very good. Math teachers should be proud. But I wrote the book in 2021. Now, before I do the reading, I want to say something to you. I had to pick a position, a stance, where I was writing from. And I picked the lens. You always have to pick a side as to how you're going to write. So I picked the lens of being a boy who was 12, 13 years old, and I went back in time. So the story is being told from a boy who is between 10 and 13 years old. So if you open your books now, I'm going to go to chapter 22. If there's anybody who wants to volunteer to read, you're more than welcome, but I'll do the reading for you. Are you okay with that? Chapter 22, October 1974. January of 1974 was going to be a big year for me. I was at the top of my game. I was an excellent athlete with several trophies under my belt. My father, after years of persuasion, had finally relented to allow me to take part in athletic meets all across Zululand. I'd won my division at school. I was allowed to accompany the school team to zonal meetings in Empangeni, Felixton, and even went to Gingandlovu. Now, mind you, all of this participation was at segregated levels. Indian schools competing with other Indian schools. Sometimes I wish we had gotten certificates instead of prizes that were items of china and crockery. The crockery is now all gone, save for a few pictures that are lurking in a photo album long forgotten in a shed somewhere in somebody's farm, somebody's barn. I'll bet they're even looking at those pictures and are wondering, who is this athlete? Time does alter the mechanics of families and days gone by. Now my prized possessions will be shards for archaeologists to find someday. I wish I had a paper trail to show off my athletic prowess. My father had been promoted to a storeman as a Bowser boy. Now, if you're not sure what a Bowser boy is, back in the day, the people that filled your gas, your petrol at the station was called a Bowser boy. There's a footnote at the bottom. A man of 64 was reaching his twilight years. Jeff, you picked the wrong chapter, eh? I think my father may have slowed down as a tractor driver, and the new modern machines were becoming technically too difficult for him to drive. As tall as my father was, these new Massey Fergusons was a monster in front of him. Further, the young African drivers were able to speed and do more loads to the railway siding as my father could. So the promotion was an ideal opportunity for him to slow down a bit. He controlled the stores department and filled gas for the estate owners. Of course, we were all white. This created an opportunity to meet more of the white folk, including the managing director of the timber estate. These casual friendships and chit-chat gave my father the impetus to stand up and speak when the school was going to be curtailed at the end of Standard 4. As I said, this was going to be a big year for me. Father had single-handedly gone to the managing director of the estate and asked for a reprieve. The managing director wanted to send us to a school, Standard 7, out of town. This meant we would spend an hour on a bus traveling to Mpangeni. Public transport was non-existent and we had no family car. There was no busing system for students, nor public transport. My father was a wise man beyond his years. He asked the managing director to provide a school bus for all the children. Since the managing director could not provide transport for school children, he made a concession and allowed us to continue grade 7 at the state-aided school. I still cannot fathom to this day why the other families were not happy that my father had won such a victory for all of us. My family had suffered the trials and tribulations of boarding school with my older siblings, and so had many others. The girl child was at the greatest risk of abuse in boarding homes or stopping school completely. I don't have to tell you what that means. And this meant that many of my school friends, the girl children, had to get married very, very early. I think you all know that story. Yet I still cannot understand the backtalk my father got for saving children from abuse, sexual abuse, and free labor at boarding homes. Nevertheless, days would turn to weeks and weeks to months, and I think the local villagers saw the folly of their ways. Fences were mended literally and figuratively, and the village returned to normal again. It cannot go unsaid that my mother was a wolf, and she would fend off any attack that came upon her household. This medicine woman would go to the end of the earth to heal you, but she was quick-tempered and slayed would-be dragons that dared to chastise her husband, my father, for doing the right thing. My father was a genteel soul who sought peace above all else. As the village returned to normal, the winter of my discontent was approaching. And little did I perceive that one day my idyllic life in a rural village would surface. Jeff, you did pick the wrong chapter, eh? So this was going to be the sum of my discontent. My father's health was failing. And we didn't notice. His much-loved fishing trips was becoming less frequent. My mother was rather happy. It seemed her prayers had been finally answered. Father was now attending church with more frequency. My father's very old school. He may not have heard of his aches and pains, but one night he got up in the middle of the night and started to write feverishly with a book and a pencil. My mother kept asking if he was all right. Little did I know that my father was feeling pretty ill and thought that death was imminent, and he wanted to write his last will and testament. His visits to the village doctor became a regular thing. My father may have known that he was not getting any better. I did not see any changes in his physical features, but my parents may have known he was not well at all. My father had never taken a day sick of work. Finally, one weekend, my brother-in-law drove him to a family member practicing medicine in Tugela, my ancestral hometown. The families had known each other for many years. Apart from being relatives, I think my father placed in his trust in someone who could speak his own language. Further, the good doctor had a good reputation with my entire clansmen in Tugela. Who would have known that one day this direct descendant would study in native India and then practice medicine as an immigrant to Canada? This doctor's son is a doctor in Canada. Life at my home seemed normal. However, my father's daily regimen continued. Early to rise, off to work, at home, and the heavy alcohol use would become noticeable to me. One fishing trip, I recall the look of surprise my brother-in-law's face at the beach. He and my father had been taking a swig off a bottle of brandy or whiskey or cane, like something like vodka, right? I noticed a look of consternation on my brother-in-law's face. He remained silent, and he told me later, this was the day that he knew his beloved father-in-law was fighting pains and ailments because my father had drunk the entire bottle of cane, which looks like vodka, right? Very soon, my father will be resting more than fishing on weekends. One such weekend, my father could not summon the energy to go fishing with the neighbors. He relented and let me go with the group of fishermen. The men had caught their quota for the day. I could only muster the energy to bring home 6 large shad. The men had caught 120, which is illegal. I was a God-fearing student and I was afraid my father would be jailed. I caught my 6 and I brought that home. That evening, mother prepared the fish the way she usually did. My father barely ate. But the tears welled up, and he acknowledged that his boy had grown up to feed the family and him. I was 12 years old. Everything I learned about fishing had been at the feet of my father. Little did I know that the end was near. I made several trips with the neighbors to catch fish, and every return was more nostalgia and tears. It never occurred to me that my father's death was imminent. Father never picked up a rod again. So one day there was a lot of consternation and whispering in the house. The next thing, transport arrived. All of the days of my life, this was the one day I chose to have a bath. I'm going to make a confession. I hated having a bath as a little boy. This is the one day I rushed into the bath, had a nice shower on the farm. And when I came out of the bathroom, my mother yanked me out to say goodbye to my father, who was already in the car driving away. I barely made it out of the bath. Father was being driven away to King Edward Hospital in Durban. Jeff, you do pick them, eh? This would be the last time I saw my father alive in my home. When I got into the house, my mother took the strap to me. I, as a child of 12, 13, could not figure out what crime I had committed. But there's deep symbolism in that, right? When you're having a shower and you're washing your body away, I was virtually washing my dad away out of the house. My father was kept in a hospital several weeks. We could not afford to visit him. It's like going from here to Toronto. My brother-in-law was courting my sister then, took my family on several occasions, as well as my brothers. We made 1 or 2 trips to see him in the hospital. Back in the day, children were not allowed in state hospitals. I would sit on the banks and watch the traffic go by, not realizing that years to come, we would bid farewell to another sibling in the very same hospital. On one occasion, my father requested to see me. My older brothers either asked permission or smuggled me through a side door for a quick visit. I entered the ward. I saw my father, as usual, lying with a hand in prayer on his bed. The younger men in the ward were cheering him up and speaking to him in my native language is Tamil, and they were offering him milk to sustain his energy. I cannot recall the conversation I had with my father. I think he wanted one last look at his last born. I was born in my father's twilight years. I think my father might have been, if you do the math, 50 when I was conceived. So in the Tamil culture, they called me the love child, but in the modern world, you call me a mistake. So in the modern world, when somebody has a baby late in their life, you say, that's my love child. And of course, knowing what I know now, I was a mistake, but a nice mistake, I think. And so I think my father wanted to see me one last time, born him in his twilight years. Very soon I was bundled out, and it still did not occur to me that would be my last moment. Now, after that, time stood still for me. We would go about our daily affairs at home like zombies, like the living dead. On the night of the 27th of October 1974, there was a knock on the door at my house. My mother was up at the front door with me in tow, half asleep. My eldest brother burst through the door, and the loud wailing started in my home, like most families do when somebody passes away. My mother hugged her firstborn and started to sob. As a little boy of 13, I didn't know what was happening. I just lay on the bed, still groggy from being woken up at midnight, and my brother leaned over and said to me, "Father died tonight." I'm sorry. I do want to finish the chapter. So still groggy and being woken up in the middle of the night, my brother leaned over and said, "Father died tonight." And so, boys and girls, the sum of my discontent was ushered in. I was only 13. Okay, now that we had a good cry, let's go on to the next step. Jeffrey Gendron, thank you for asking me to read. Now, I do want to tell you something, boys and girls. Are we all good? I won't pick this chapter for the university. So, the part one is that I'm a self-taught writer. I picked the lens of being 12 or 13. But I want to go to you now. The part two of this is, if Naicker can publish a book, why can't I? And I'm just going to say to you, it's easy peasy. Just start by writing. You have all the support you have with the teachers around you at the school. So my golden rule for you is write, write, write. Don't worry about language. Don't worry about spelling, syntax, grammar, tense. Don't worry about that. I confess to you, I couldn't do all of this here. Is Simon Hawir here? Simon is the guy who set the text for me, because mine were jumping all over the place. Daniel Rojas, the refugee from Colombia, did all the photo shoots, did all the color choreography. I got help. You just write your story. Now, we have beautiful tools with us. So just capture the story. Don't worry about labeling the chapters. If you look at my book, the chapters are labeled. It'll come to you. Just say chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. It'll come to you. Later you can come back and you can edit. Now, there are some tricks to writing. All self-taught. I have a master copy. I'm not touching that copy. Then I have the first draft. That's where I play and do all these funny things because, I panic like nobody's business if I lose something. But I still have one copy called the master that I've kept. I don't touch it. That's if something goes south. That's the doomsday plan. If something goes, I still have a copy that I can go back. So, make notes. Now, I write in my sleep. When I'm sleeping at night, I think, oh, yeah. I remember when the first ice cream came to my village. By the way, I'm 62 years old, so I've gone through several decades, 6 decades, 62. I know when ice cream came to my village, the first day. If you look at my Instagram account, you'll see the guy with the cart pushing that, riding a bicycle with the box in the front. I remember the first day ice cream came to my village. Guess what it cost? Can somebody guess what ice cream cost when I was growing up? How many cents? 5 cents? 75, it was 3 cents. If you bought the watered ice cream, the sorbet, it was 3 cents. If you wanted the one with milk, it was 5 cents. We were dirt poor. I remember going to the ice cream bar to buy the ice cream, and father went to the little purse and pulled out the 5 cents. When I went to the ice cream cart, the money fell. All I had in my hand was 3 cents, but I wanted the milk ice cream. Guess what the driver did? He gave me the ice cream. As a little boy, I wolfed it down. There's an ice cream you get in Costco with the wafer on top. I wolfed it. I never thought for a minute, what's this poor African guy going to do because he's 2 cents short? That 2 cents that he gave to me is worth millions because I got the ice cream. So I write in my sleep. So when I get up in the morning, or I have an iPad near my bed, I just write the word ice cream. I know what that means. Now my second book is on its way. So I have a little note here. I just write something that comes to my mind. I write it down. I know, I just have a key word. I can fill that in. So that's how you write. I'm saying that to you. Now, when do I write? Boys and girls, I write in my sleep. When my sleep breaks around midnight, 1 o'clock, and my mind is racing, and I think, okay, that's a nice chapter. Oh, yeah, that's what Ayatonin said to me that day. He might feature in the next book. I don't know. I write it down. When he laughed at me, grown man, you fell for the trick of saying too many postings. I put a note down somewhere. When I get back, I know exactly what I spoke to him. I spoke to him on the corner near the staff room at the old Catholic Central High School. Am I right or wrong? That's exactly. And there was Miss Darragon, and they're all smiling at this idiot. Oh my God, he fell for that trick. But it happens. We've got to be wise in the word. What's the word we use today? Woke, but we won't go there now. Okay? Where else do I write? Where else do I write? If you talk about the ocean and the sea, you have me. If you want to get my attention, you talk about fishing and the ocean, I'll listen to you. So in my rod, I cast my line into the water and I'm waiting for a fish to bite. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? You're standing and waiting for fish to bite the hook, right? The bait. I write my essays. Okay, when did the First World War, I'm talking when I was a student now. First World War here, 1914, 1918. What caused that war? There were 4 main reasons. Okay, what's the acronym? You go, you write the essay there, you come home and you type it. But you have to have a good memory. Okay, you have to work on things like that. So now, boys and girls, this is the second part. We've done the first part. I'm now doing part 3. And I do want to offer you a chance to ask questions. Anything you want, there's no wrong question. Anything you want to ask about me writing, when I wrote, why I wrote, I'm quite happy to take your challenge. Questions? Yes, my dear.
How was your confidence to write that book? How was your confidence?
The confidence. Where did I get the confidence to write the book? Now, Mr. Naicker started writing the book a couple of months before I turned 60. Always wanted to write. And I said to myself, before I turn 60, it's now or never. So I plucked up the courage, I started writing, and I'm going to admit, I was a little afraid of my writing. What are people going to say when they read it? What are people going to say? But you know what? It's my story. I'm saying it. And I did a little bit of cheating. At the back of the book, I'm very careful to get this picture here. I found this on Google. It's a group of South Africans writing the book. I chased and I chased and I chased. I finally got the person on the 3rd try. The guy said, you're talking to the wrong person. This person gave me permission to take this picture. But trains, I lived near the railway tracks on the farm in Kwambanambi. So the trains went every day by. I'm fascinated by trains. So, at the back here, I write, some of the stuff is in my imagination. Some of the stuff might be a little masala, ginger and garlic. We call that, what's the word for that? Embellishing. Whereas I write, I'm taking that privilege to write. So it's my story, I'm saying it. You might say, hey, but I grew up with you. That's not true. Well, that's how you remember it, but I remember it this way. That's a little bit of a writer's privilege. Okay? So, but the confidence grew. I wasn't confident. Google is a great tool. But of course, I wasn't listening to my teachers, Miss Buchanan, Miss Mullins, in class. I was a naughty boy too. With all the degrees that I got, I was also a normal student. So I didn't listen enough. But Google taught me. But you have to be able to read and listen. And you build your confidence. Listen, I'm 60 years old. If I can't be confident now, then I'm never going to be confident. But it's something you build. But we have child writers too. I'm coming to that soon. Next question, anybody? Yes. Who supported me in the writing? Okay, I come from, my father was a pundit. My father didn't go to school. My father went to school once in 7 days. My father came from a family of 13 children on the farm in South Africa. The girls didn't go to school. This book is also dedicated to girls who didn't go to school. Because girls in Africa don't go to school. You stay home, 13, 14, learn how to cook, get married and have children. Boys go to school. And that's a big mistake. Because when you teach a boy, you only teach how many people? Count. One person. When you teach a girl, how many people do you teach? You teach 3 generations. Let me repeat that. When you teach a boy, sorry gentlemen, when you teach a boy, you teach one fellow, Micheal Naicker. When you teach my sister, you'll teach my sister, you'll teach her children and her children's children. That's 3 generations. That's the difference. But in Africa, we've got it upside down. And I'm just speaking for Africa. I'm an African as well. We got it wrong. So that's a story that came. I just wanted to, who supported me? My siblings. My father could read and write Tamil like a professor. But he came from a family of 13. My father went to school, guess how many days? Once in 7 days. Today was Munsami's turn to go to school. Tomorrow the next brother went to school. Tomorrow the next brother went to school. Tomorrow the next. On the 7th day, my father got his turn to go to school. With all of that, my father was a professor because he had grade 3 education in the town, but he could read and write the vernacular. So who's my supporters? My family. I think of my nieces. I have a nephew who's a retired vice chancellor of a university, a nephew, my sister's son. I have a nephew who is one of the top neurosurgeons in South Africa. I have a nephew who's a cop and he's a millionaire. I have another nephew who's a math fundi. Sadly for him, he's got cancer. He's still alive. He can't teach. But guess what happened to my nieces? All 3 of them. If your brothers are so brilliant, what happened to my nieces? My brother-in-law was old school. He kept them at home. So that was a support that I had, that inner support, intrinsic. What's motivating me to write? And of course, I got to admit, if you open the first cover of that book, what does it say? The dedication page. Open the first page. You ask me who supported me. I'm going to read it for you. To my wife, Magdalene Veronica Thomas Naicker, my true North Star. So who's my biggest support? My wife, my spouse. To my wife, Magdalene Veronica Thomas Naicker, my true North Star. Anybody knows what the North Star is? You know what the North Star is? If you're a sailor at night and you look into the sky, one of the bright stars up is the North Star. So if you're a sailor and you can find north, can you find south? Can you find east? Can you find west? My wife is my guiding light, and she gave me one instruction, one mandate on this book. She said to me, Michael, well, when she gets cross, she calls me by an Indian name. She says, hey, Muthu, I don't want this book to insult anybody. Now, I grew up in a time of segregation and apartheid. I kind of mentioned that here, racial segregation. I went to Indian school. My African friends went to the African school next door. And the colored children of mixed descent with that school, and the white children went to school far away from us. But I had friends across because we were children. We didn't know what racial segregation meant. Many of the girls in my class did not go beyond grade 7. You read it in my book, because they had to stay home. I went to high school. Not a single person in my class, the girls, finished high school. So when I wrote the book, initially I wrote it in a negative way, a little bit insulting. But I wrote it like that initially. Then I came back and I looked at the different lens and said, clean this up, sanitize this, don't offend anybody. My wife said, do not offend anybody who reads this book, because guess what? When I went to South Africa and I went on television and I went on the radio, who was listening? Those very girls that dropped out of school. Now imagine if I wrote bad things about them. So you have to be careful how you write, eh? You have to be sensitive. So my support was my siblings, my family, and most important, my true North Star, my wife. Thank you for the question. Sidonia? No, what's your name? Madonna. Pretty close. If you want to buy the book, how much is it? Okay. Mr. Gendron, when I did the first launch, I have two versions of the book, a hard copy and a digital copy. When I did the first flight on Black History Month, I went and altered the price for $10 a digital copy. But since you asked, the book is $26 on Amazon. I chose Amazon, but I'll come to that. We'll ask that. But if you want a copy of the book, I'm going to ask you to give your name to Mr. Gendron, and only for this week, I'll discount it to $10. I get it about $7.88 as an author. So I'm going to buy it and just pass it on to you if you want a copy of the book. Okay, so I'm not trying to make profit on you. Are we good? How much is the book for this week? Only $10. And I'll do you a favor, I'll autograph the book. Who asked the first question? Who asked the first question? Who asked the first question here? Yeah, honey, that's for you. Who asked the second question? That's for you. These are my promo materials, a pen with the title. Madonna, for you. Next question. Yeah. How are you? How am I today? I'm well. What's the question you're asking? I was born in South Africa. I left South Africa in 2005 on the 9th of August 2005. International Women's Day is 9th of August, is always the 9th in South Africa. 9th of August, International Women's Day. I left South Africa at the age of 45. Something is wrong here, to come to another country and to seek new life and new adventures. And I tell you why I did it. I did it the same reason your parents left their countries. I left for my children. I left South Africa at the age of 45 for my children, because the violence in my hometown was getting out of hand. The killings, the robberies, and just plain ungovernable. I thought, time for me to take my children out of this country. And that's exactly why your parents leave the countries. A better life for children out of their homeland. Okay, last pen, yours. How long did I take to write the book? Now this is funny. This book has been in my head since the day I started my master's program in 1994. Long before that, the book was in my head. I was writing, but nothing on paper. 1994, I studied in England with a group of students, and one of them was an author, and she said to me, if you're writing a book, keep your mouth shut. Do not give the title to anybody, because if I share the title, you're in trouble. So I had the title since 1994. I've been fermenting the book and read for 26, 27 years. But a month before I turned 60, which is 2 years ago, it took me about full writing every day. What? By the way, COVID gave me the opportunity. I was coming to school. You guys were not in school. I was sitting alone in school. I wrote flat out for 4 months. I probably wrote the book in 4 months. Okay. Yeah.
What was the main purpose of writing the book?
The main purpose, which I'm going to tie to the third part, is to tell my story. The main purpose of this book, which I'm going to go quickly to now, is tell my story. Okay? Why did you write this book? I wanted to share my story. My mother was a traditional healer. My mother could cure you of any ailment. If you couldn't have a baby, you go to all the doctors, you come to my mother. Your wife's going to have a baby. You have a sore on your hand, no doctor is curing, you come to my mother. And guess who was the doctor's assistant? Guess who was the doctor's assistant? Me. She'll say, Michael, my mother is sure, Michael, I'll be playing, Michael, I'll hear the voice down the village. Yes, ma, pretend I was next door. Michael, go into the bushes there, bring me this tree, bring me this leaf, bring me this leaf, bring me this seed. Boom, cured. But you know what's the biggest mistake I made? You know what's the biggest mistake I made? I thought I was too clever at 13. My mother was so stupid. What is this old woman doing? Go and climb on the seringaberry tree, bring those bitter leaves, she'll crush it down. Now ladies who couldn't have a baby and you're struggling, your time is not coming. My mother would say, climb up that tree, it's called a seringaberry tree. Poisonous to the world. Climb up, she'll crush the leaves, she'll roll into small sweet balls, some sugar and give it to the baby. Guess what? Within hours, contractions are coming, your baby's on its way. Women will come to if you read my book, every night there was different colored people in my house. My mother was a midwife, she delivered babies. Guess who was the doctor's assistant? Me, getting the best foods from these homes because they're treating the doctor's son very well. She wasn't a doctor, she was a midwife. People would come now screaming I saw things I'm not supposed to see as a boy. I used to peep through the hole, right? But I didn't put all of that in the book, I had to keep it clean. My mother delivered babies. Women who couldn't have a baby, she'd cure them. Women who had a baby in a breech position, they would die. I would see my mother massaging the stomach, turning the baby over. That was my mother, a traditional healer. I wanted to capture a story. In fact, somebody said, why didn't you write it? I said to you, as a boy of 13, you think you're too clever. Oh, my mother was stupid. But you know what? When I got older, age 20, I'm thinking, my God, my mother got so clever in 7 years. You get the joke, right? I was 13, she died when I was 20. I'm thinking, in 7 years she got so clever. No, I got a bit more wisdom. We don't appreciate our parents. We don't appreciate our parents. Okay? So, next question. Safi, come. Ask the question. You can come and ask her if you want to, Safi. We've got about 10 minutes before I give you the challenge. Yeah. So I'll run up in 5. Come, Safi, quickly. Safi and I have every time I see Safi in the uniform, she's in uniform, but Mr. Naicker, he doesn't see properly. Yes, Safi. Yes.
Would there be like a part 2 about you?
Will there be
a part 2?
Safi's asking, will there be a part 2 in coming to Canada? Yes. So, I'm not going to give you the title because I said to you it's private knowledge. Although it's registered on Amazon already, I have the cover designed by Daniel and Simon. I have the back written. Don't ask me how I did this. I wrote the first chapter and I wrote the last chapter. How I did that, I have no idea. I wrote the first chapter of the book. I wrote the last chapter. Now I've just got to try and dream more at night and write. And I have my iPad. I write here, I'm not calling it African Sons 2. I have another name because people don't want. So it's already registered. I have an ISBN number for all this. Nobody can take the title. It's there, but I'm not sharing it. But the part 2 is already on its way. I've written the first and the last chapter. Okay, next question before we kind of round up. Yes. Yes, I learned how much I didn't know. I learned how much I didn't know. I learned how much I should have been listening in my class when my English teacher was teaching how to write an opening paragraph, how to write a closing paragraph, how to substantiate. I also learned don't talk too much. Let me give you an example. I read I get up in the morning, I brush my teeth, put on my shirt, put on my clothes. You don't have to say that when you're writing a book. I got up, dressed, and went to work because you are smart people. You can fill in the blanks. So sometimes it's important not to write too much. Give your audience credit. They're smart people. I want to close and you can do the closing. Boys and girls, if there's no burning questions, I want to conclude by saying, do you have a story? Do you have a story? So, why am I not hearing about it? You're shaking your heads. Why am I not hearing your story? Don't shake your head. What's stopping you from writing? What's stopping you from writing? So, why am I not reading your story? Each one of you, my children, all 700 of you, take my challenge. Take this challenge today. Write your story. Do not worry about language. You can even think it in Arabic. You can think it in Farsi. You can think it in Swahili. You can think it in Zulu. Think it in Dutch. Think it in, help me, in French. But write your story. Now, the technical issues, you have teachers on the staff who can help you. You got friends. I went to a class, they were doing PA editing. Your friends are writing, you edit that. And if you got no friends, you have two people you can ask. Who is those two people? Who? Okay, me. Okay, that's three now. You can ask me. Who is the person you can ask? Who? Your parents? If you're listening, I said who you can ask. Danny and Simon, they've gone. They're in university now. You can ask teachers. You can ask Google and Siri. They know everything. And of course, if you're a married man, you can ask your wife. She knows everything too. But don't tell wife I said that now. Okay? Google and Siri can help you. Now, boys and girls, I know how to speak. I know how to write. But even I too, I can't keep saying the word beautiful, beautiful, beautiful in the book. So if you want to replace the word, you look at thesaurus. You click on the right side. It gives you 5 other words you can use. Okay, now boys and girls, that's the challenge. Today, I'm leaving you with a challenge. Do you have a story to say? When am I going to hear the story? Can you take up my challenge and start writing your story? Don't worry about language. Don't worry about syntax, grammar. Write your story. On that note, I want to challenge CCH to start writing their own stories. Don't worry about language. If you're starting a project, I certainly am willing to be part of it. But I need some other smarter English teachers and helpers and technical people. I can't do it alone, but that's a challenge coming in the fall that we can do. I want to thank Ms. Lafazo for allowing me to speak here, Mr. Sleeman for supporting and holding the fort in the office, and Mr. Gendron, but most important, your teachers for giving up your time to come here. I thank you from the bottom of my heart.